biggest U.S. Canada military contract in years has been scrapped. This wasn't supposed to happen. A massive $66 billion defense deal with months of negotiations, countless backroom discussions, all gone in an instant. And Canada didn't just walk away. It turned to France and Australia, sidelining the US and leaving Washington and Trump in shock. But here's the thing, this isn't just about money, military hardware, or even Canada's defense strategy. This decision could mark a seismic shift in global power, a reordering of alliances that could reshape the very foundation of Western geopolitics. Let's break it all down. The $66 billion deal that just collapsed. First, let's talk about what was on the table. Canada was set to purchase a massive fleet of F-35 fighter jets and advanced naval equipment from the US in a deal worth $66 billion. This wasn't just any military acquisition, it was a strategic move designed to strengthen Canada's air force, naval power, and overall defense capabilities. But there was more to it than that. This deal would have reinforced Canada's long-standing alliance with Washington, further binding it to the US military-industrial complex. And that's exactly what Washington wanted. For months, the US had been pushing hard for this agreement. They wanted Canada to stay reliant on American military hardware, just like most of NATO. Keeping Canada in their defense ecosystem meant maintaining influence, both politically and militarily. But then, at the last minute, Canada did the unthinkable. They scrapped the deal. Instead of buying from the US, Canada turned to France and Australia, and that's when all hell broke loose. Why did Canada walk away? So why did Canada back out of a deal that had been months in the making? Why walk away from a contract that would have strengthened its long-standing military relationship with the United States? According to government insiders, it wasn't just about the price tag, it was about political independence and Canada's growing concerns about its reliance on American military hardware. For decades, Canada has been heavily dependent on US defense systems, a position that has given Washington significant influence over Ottawa's military decisions. But in recent years, Canada has found itself caught between two global giants, the United States and China. And as US policies become more unpredictable under Trump, Canadian leaders are looking for ways to diversify their alliances and reduce their reliance on a single superpower. This decision is not just about breaking free from US influence, it's about choosing stability over uncertainty. That's where France and Australia come in. Rather than committing to the US-made F-35 fighter jets, Canada has pivoted to France, opting to purchase a fleet of next-generation Rafale fighter jets instead. The Rafale is a direct competitor to the F-35, and this move signals that Canada is willing to step away from US military influence in favor of a more balanced and strategically independent defense strategy. But it's not just about the Air Force. Canada is also looking to reshape its naval power. Instead of relying on American defense manufacturers, Ottawa has turned to Australia to provide advanced naval defense technologies in a multi-billion-dollar agreement that could shift the balance of power in the Pacific. By choosing France and Australia over the US, Canada is sending a strong message. It no longer wants to be completely dependent on Washington for its defense needs. But there's another huge reason Canada is walking away from the US. Over the past few years, Trump's aggressive trade policies, tariffs, and unpredictable approach to international agreements have put Canada in a difficult position. From steel tariffs to disputes over energy exports, Canada has repeatedly found itself on the receiving end of Washington's economic pressure tactics. By shifting its military partnerships, Canada is not only securing better economic terms, it's also making a calculated political move to reduce its vulnerability to sudden US policy shifts. This isn't just a military decision, it's a strategic realignment, one that could have long-lasting consequences for US-Canada relations and the global balance of power. The Trump factor: how US tariffs push Canada away. For years, Trump has treated Canada like a second-class trade partner, publicly criticizing its policies, questioning its commitment to defense, and repeatedly undermining economic cooperation between the two nations. One of his most controversial moves was imposing massive tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, citing national security concerns. This decision shocked Ottawa, considering Canada has been one of America's closest allies for over a century. The tariffs didn't just strain diplomatic ties, they directly hurt Canadian industry industries and workers, creating tension that never fully eased. But that was just the beginning. Trump threatened to tear up NAFTA, the long-standing trade agreement that had governed North American commerce for decades. He forced Canada into a renegotiation that led to the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, a deal that many Canadian officials saw as less favorable than the original. To them, it was clear. Trump wasn't treating Canada like a partner. He was treating them like an opponent. Then came the pressure on military spending. Trump frequently called out Canada for not spending enough on defense, accusing them of being free riders who benefit from NATO protection without paying their fair share. He demanded Canada increase its military budget, often in a way that seemed more like a businessman pressuring a customer rather than an ally making a strategic request. So when the $66 billion defense deal came along, many saw it as a peace offering, an opportunity to rebuild trust between the two nations. The US expected Canada to accept the deal as a way to mend relations and reaffirm its military dependence on Washington. Instead, Canada used it as a wake-up call. By choosing France and Australia, Canada is doing more than just purchasing military equipment. It's making a statement. It no longer wants to be entirely dependent on US weapons and technology. By diversifying its defense suppliers, Canada is reducing Washington's leverage over its military decisions and signaling that it's willing to walk away from the US if necessary. And Washington did not take this well. Trump's furious reaction. When Trump heard the news, his reaction was predictable, but still shocking. He didn't hold back. In a fiery statement, he called Canada's decision a slap in the face to American manufacturers, arguing that after everything the US had done for Canada, this was a betrayal. Then came the social media outbursts. His allies in Washington erupted, demanding retaliation. Some pushed for new tariffs on Canadian goods, arguing that if Canada won't buy American, America shouldn't buy Canadian either. Others questioned Canada's loyalty to NATO, warning that this could weaken North American security cooperation. But here's the thing, Canada isn't backing down. In fact, this decision might be just the beginning of a much bigger shift, because if Canada, one of America's closest allies, can walk away from a major US defense deal, what's stopping other nations from doing the same? The bigger picture, is this the beginning of a major realignment? Canada's decision isn't just about one deal, it's part of a larger global shift that's been building for years. For decades, the United States has been the dominant force in shaping Western alliances, with its military and economic power keeping its closest partners firmly within its sphere of influence. But now, things are starting to change. Across the world, long-standing US allies are reassessing their relationships, not because they want to abandon the US, but because Washington's leadership has become more unpredictable and, in some cases, more aggressive. Take Europe, for example. Traditionally a strong partner of the United States, European nations are expanding trade and diplomatic ties with China, despite clear warnings from Washington. Some European leaders see this as an opportunity to diversify their economic dependencies, reducing their reliance on a US that has become increasingly protectionist under Trump's policies. Then there's Japan, another critical US ally. While Tokyo has historically depended on the US for security, it has quietly been strengthening its defense cooperation with Australia. The two nations have signed military agreements allowing troops to train on each other's soil, signaling a shift toward regional security partnerships that don't rely solely on American support. And now Canada, one of America's closest and most reliable allies, has made a monumental decision to turn its back on a US defense deal in favor of France and Australia. This isn't just a financial or logistical move. This is a strategic decision, one that suggests Canada wants to lessen its dependence on Washington in the long term. For decades, the world has operated under a system where the US was the center of gravity in Western alliances. But recent events suggest that a post-American era, or at least a world in which countries no longer see the US as the automatic leader, is beginning to take shape. If Canada, a country that shares the longest unprotected border with the United States, is willing to shift its military alliances, what does that say about the future of US leadership? Could this be just the beginning of an even bigger realignment? And if more countries follow Canada's lead, how will Washington respond? What happens next? The consequences of this decision are far bigger than just a canceled contract. This isn't just about defense spending or which country supplies Canada's military. It's about power, influence, and the future of alliances on the global stage. And the shockwaves of this $66 billion reversal are only beginning to be felt. For Canada, this is a moment of reckoning. After decades of military dependence on the US, they are charting their own course. No more waiting on Washington's approval, no more being pressured into deals that serve American interests first. This move isn't just about securing better aircraft or naval technology, it's about freedom from US control over its military decisions. By looking to France and Australia, Canada is ensuring that its defense strategy isn't dictated by shifting American politics or future administrations, and that's a powerful statement. It's also a smart economic play. The US has become an increasingly unpredictable partner, one that slaps tariffs on allies and threatens to upend trade deals at any moment. By walking away from a deal that could have left them vulnerable to sudden US policy changes, Canada is protecting its long-term defense interests. The new partnerships with France and Australia not only provide cutting-edge technology, but also come without the baggage of US trade wars and political volatility. For the US, the loss of this deal is more than just a financial hit, it's a dent in their dominance. For decades, Washington has relied on its closest allies to buy American-made weapons, reinforcing its status as the undisputed leader in military sales. Canada's decision to break that cycle is a direct challenge to US influence. And this isn't just about one contract, this is about the message it sends. If Canada can walk away, who's next? Other allies are already reevaluating their relationships with the US. Europe is strengthening trade ties with China. Japan is deepening military cooperation with Australia. If more countries decide to diversify their defense partnerships, the US could find itself losing ground in a market it once controlled completely. For France and Australia, however, this is a massive victory. France has been pushing to position itself as a serious competitor in global arms sales, and securing Canada as a buyer for its Rafale fighter jets is a huge win. It's a sign that American-made military technology isn't the only option anymore. Australia, too, is stepping up as a major player in military alliances, strengthening its position in the Pacific and forging deeper ties with Canada. But beyond the economic and military implications, this deal is symbolic. It marks a shift in the global order, one where allies aren't automatically falling in line behind the US anymore. Canada's decision is a signal to the world that countries are willing to explore new partnerships outside of Washington's sphere of influence. And that raises a major question. Is this the beginning of a post-American era? If one of the US's closest allies is willing to break ranks on a deal of this scale, others may follow. The world is changing, and America's grip on its allies may be slipping. Trump didn't see this coming, neither did Washington, but now that the first domino has fallen, there's no telling what comes next.